Hey, this is Dan Lehman from automationhelpers.com, and today we're doing a follow-up video to another one where we addressed how we could automatically create project templates inside of Airtable, and we can use that to automatically generate our tasks. Now, if you haven't seen that video, I'd recommend that you check out that one first, because this video won't make much sense in context without that video. In this video, we're going to answer the number one question that everybody asks as soon as they've tried this themselves, which is, how do we get other fields to map across? Because if you've done this, you've realized that it's only going to duplicate the task names and the order, which is an integer, and it'll link it to the project. But that's not very helpful when it comes to project management because you typically have additional fields that you want to template out. Some examples would be you want to have a default assignee who's assigned to that task. You want to have a default status of to do so that you don't have to manually input that every time. Well, if we leave that up to the user, kind of defeats the purpose of templating it in the first place. And so we want to address how to do that. Now, I'm going to use these two particular fields as examples, but this is the same exact process that you'd follow if you've created custom fields. So if you've added other fields to the table that you want to map across, there's some caveats to it that you might have to consider, but it's the same general process. To get into this, the first thing that I would recommend is I actually I make a copy of the base that I'm working with. I do this because anytime that you're editing code, especially if you're not super comfortable with JavaScript yourself, there's always a chance that you could mess something up and you really don't want to mess up the rest of your base and the data that's there. So I just, as a safety precaution, would create a copy of that base before we edit anything. Next thing you'll notice I've opened up my extensions tab, pulled this open, and there's that button already here for editing code. Again, because you already have the extension operating, so you should see this here. I'll click to be able to edit code. This is going to take me into full screen here. Now, to get started, we're going to scroll down a little bit. And I've seen a couple different versions of this. So I'm going to give you roughly the line number that you should be looking for, but yours might be a couple off just depending on how it got deployed. But we're looking initially for about row 99 here. And if you're not familiar with code, that's okay. We're actually just going to kind of help you through the process. Think of this like we're editing text. No problem. I will say, though, that if this intimidates you as you're editing code or you have unique requirements, you can always reach out to us over at automationhelpers.com. We provide services around these kind of things. So if you ever need help with scripting and automations and integrations, happy to do that for you. But you are a brave person and you're going to try this yourselves. So let's go ahead and check this out. We're around line 99. Now, the idea here is that we have different fields and we're trying to pull this from the template itself. We're trying to pull that value. And the next step will be we're going to assign that value into the child record that we're creating. We're going to actually just copy the same format that we already have up here. I'm going to press enter. And if you see these little slashes here, those are just comments, meaning that these lines don't actually do anything unless you uncomment them. We could have, text here, and that's not going to mess up your code. So if you want to make a big note to yourself, like, hey, Dan, here's where you put stuff in, that's okay. Just make sure you've got those double backslashes there. And we're going to follow the same process. I'm going to tab in here so it's all in line. And then we're using single quotes. So I'll follow the same process. Notice that they called them template types and template order. So I'm going to follow the same convention here. You don't have to. You could call it something else if you wanted to, but I think for consistency, it's good to just keep it the same. So we'll call this template as kind of our prefix. And then I'm going to use template assigning. And I'm going to put a colon there. So this is saying the template assignee variable, and we're setting it equal to C, and C is like the child record itself. And then we're able to say get cell value. This is what's kind of sucking up that data that we want. We're grabbing it from this cell. And then we add our parentheses here. And in our parentheses, we simply say the name of the field that we're doing. In this case, it is assignee. You'll want to make sure that assignee is in single quotes here as well, just for consistency. You don't want to not have it in quotes at all like this, because that's going to mess stuff up. And you'll see a red squiggly line, which is usually the system yelling at you if you do that. And we're going to do our other one, which is that status field. So it's important that we add a comma. If you just go to a new line and you're adding stuff, I'm not sure if it'll call it out, but eventually you're going to get in trouble for it. So you'll want to add a comma, and that's just to signify like now we're on to a new field that we're doing. We're going to follow the same structure here. So I'll call this template status. And I'm going to do the same thing. And those of you who are coders, you'll probably realize that something's going wrong here. And there's a reason that I just want to show everybody how this works so that we kind of understand the reason of why we do this in the background. All right. I notice I forgot my colon here. Boom. So we've got our template assignee, and we're pulling out the value from the assignee field. Again, whatever the name of the field is what we're putting here. And template status, and we're pulling that from the status field. Then we're going to scroll down a little bit. And at this point, if you've done 2 fields or whatnot, you should be around 115. Same thing, we've got some commented out text right there, and we're just going to add a new line. And in this case, we're going to say the name of the field here. We'll do assignee. And what this is doing is, and it's got instructions here. It says field names on the left should match the field names in the child table. Well, the child table in this case is the tasks table where it's actually creating it. So for my naming convention, this was already assignee. It's assignee in this table. It's assignee in that table. I'd recommend you do it the same way just so you don't get confused. But you can call it whatever you want. Mine is called assignee. And now I'm going to say C dot template assignee. And what this is doing is, remember up here when we created that template assignee variable and we sucked up that data? Well, now we're going down here and we're saying, okay, take that data, and now we're going to put it into that assignee field that we have. And we're going to do the same thing for our status field. We'll do C dot, and this is our template status. You notice that it's got this nice select here, so you can start typing and you'll be able to autofill that. And we should have what we need here. Let's go ahead and press finish editing, which will save what we've been working on. I'm going to make this kind of the smaller version here. And this is where we could press run to run our script. Everything looks good so far. We're going to pick a record, and remember that chooses it from our projects table. Oh no, and this is kind of what I was talking about before about how we intentionally made a mistake. Can't create records, invalid cell value for field status. Could not find a choice with that ID or name. Let's go back into our code here. And I just wanted to explain this piece. And sometimes you'll get errors like this, and that's okay. It says it's on line 128. And if we scroll down to 128, this actually doesn't really tell us anything helpful here. But what's happening if we go back into our code around in the 90s here, here's the problem. Status is a single select field. And the issue that's happening is that, this is an out-of-the-box field that Airtable includes anyways. And we've got that status field on our template task table, and we also have it on our task table. And the values match. It's like to do, in progress, complete, or whatever they are out of the box. Well, in this case, behind the scenes, behind those text values that you see, is an ID for this value, some long combination of numbers and letters that you never really see. And the problem is because these two selects, even though we think of them as being identical, the system doesn't think of them as being identical. So we have to do something a little bit fancy when it comes to single select fields. And what we're going to do is we're going to just strip this out here because we're going to use a little bit different path for this. And we need curly braces here. So make sure you've got the curly braces, and we're going to say name because we're really grabbing the name of this. And what I'm going to do is c.get cell value as string. String is like a bit of text that we're getting. And then we're going to use this to say we want the status field. Let's go ahead and click Finish Editing again. And we'll make that smaller. And now let's try the same exact process. We run, we pick a record, test enterprise, boom. It's beautiful, my friends. We have our default assignee, our default status created. I hope this is helpful for you to make this extension a little bit more usable. I'd love to hear how you're using this in the comments down below. And of course, if this is something that's too intimidating for you, I fully understand that with no-code applications, you typically don't want to code. And that's where organizations like ours at Automation Helpers come in. So if you get stuck, if you want to engage because you've got more complex requirements, feel free to reach out to us over at automationhelpers.com.